Hey guys, welcome to the Daily Word Bible Study, a plain and simple, book by book, chapter by chapter, verse by verse study through the entire Bible. Currently we are in Isaiah chapter 6. I'm going to do part 2. The section we're getting into, this prophecy deals with the second coming of Jesus Christ, the Messiah. Now, when you read prophecy like this, we often can go from what's referred to as a near fulfillment prophecy, then to a far fulfillment. In other words, the near and the far. For example, let me see if let me pull up my screen here. I think I want to go to Luke for this. Luke 4. Okay. I'm just showing you an example of a let's do this, Luke 4. All right, yes. All right, so this is in Luke chapter 4, verse 16. And it says, and he came to Nazareth where he had been brought up. And as it was custom, he went into the synagogue on the Sabbath day, and he stood up to read. And the scroll of the prophet Isaiah was given to him. So now one of the things you would see is that they would have these large scrolls, not printed pages that we had, actually scrolls, anywhere from 2, 3, 4 foot like that, and they would roll it out. So it says, he unrolled the scroll and found the place where it was written. By the way, there were no chapter headings and verses at the time, so he had to find it, read it. And then notice what it says right here. It says, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me. I'm scrolling through. We're going to get to this verse of scripture in Isaiah, but it's in Isaiah chapter 61. But notice what it says right here. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to proclaim the good news to the poor. He sent me to proclaim liberty to the captives and recovering of sight to the blind, to set at liberty those who are oppressed, and to proclaim a year of the Lord's favor. And then he rolled up the scroll and gave it back to him. Now, here are the interesting thing, and we're not going to go into it now. We will get into it when we get to Isaiah 61. But the prophecy itself is a lot longer. Okay, it's a lot longer. In fact, I will go and read this, just to kind of show you what I mean with this. Let's see here. Doing a little Bible study excursion. I want to take the time. I want to apologize for doing this, because oftentimes when we what's this here? When we're studying Isaiah, no, if I don't spell this right, this won't. I love this Bible app, but it sometimes it has to be very exact. Okay, I'm going to read the prophecy. Now, this is the prophecy, as I said before. This is Isaiah. We're ways off from getting to this chapter. But notice what he says here. Verse 1 says, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives, and the opening of the prison to those who are bound, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. Now, this is where Jesus stops, if you remember, right? He stops at this point, and he hands the scroll back to the minister of the synagogue. Look at verse 2 again. To proclaim the year of the Lord's favor, he stops. But notice what goes on. And the day of vengeance of our God, to comfort all who mourn, to grant those who mourn in Zion, to give them a beautiful headdress instead of ashes, and the oil of gladness instead of mourning, the garment of praise instead of a faint spirit, that they may be called the oaks of righteousness, the planting of the Lord, that they may be glorified. They shall bind up the ancient ruins, and shall raise up the former devastations, and they shall repair the ruined cities, the devastation of many generations. So, with the reason why, again, I wanted to show you what's called the near and the far fulfillment. Jesus stops at the Lord's favor because that's, in a sense, the near fulfillment of what he was doing in that day. Now, there's coming another day, right, to proclaim the day of the vengeance of our God. Now, the reason why I say that is because when we talk about the second coming of Jesus, okay, so let me get back over to where we are in Romans 9. We see sprinkled throughout the writings of the prophets the prophetic utterances of the coming Messiah, or Jesus as King. In other words, one of the things that is without question is the second coming of the Lord. Now, what is debatable, okay, is what is known as the rapture of the church, which we will not get into in this study. But there's much debate as to whether or not is there a rapture of the church. What is not debatable is the second coming of Jesus. Because again, as we see in just two different prophecies in Isaiah alone, he talks about this second coming. This is what he's referring to here. So when he comes down to verse 6, and he says, "For a child will be born to us, son will be given to us, and the government will be upon his shoulders, and his name will be Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Eternal Father, Prince of Peace." So the idea is that now, when Jesus came, they didn't know him as the Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Eternal Father, Prince of Peace. When he comes the second time, now we will get into it more in terms of what does the second coming of Christ mean. Now this is where sometimes Orthodox Jew, not Orthodox Jews, but also Orthodox Jews as well as Jewish will play kind of coy by saying, well, when Jesus was here 2,000 years ago, well, which is it? Well, it's the first coming or the second coming? And there's a kind of running joke, humorous joke, where say, well, when Jesus comes, the Christians would say, hey, the second coming. Or the Jews would ask, is this your first coming or your second coming? And the question would be asked depending upon, if it's a Jew asking the question, they're going to say, well, this is your first coming. The Christians would say, this is your second coming. Well, here's the problem with the Orthodox Jews' position, because they have, when God proclaims something, just like Moses, when Moses came and said, I am come to deliver you. And remember, Moses said that the measure of the prophet in which the Jewish people were to follow, the Messiah, would be, he's going to raise up a prophet like unto me. Well, let's kind of go back and do a short trip down Moses' appointment. God sends Moses with signs and wonders. And Moses says, I've been sent by God to deliver you, break the bondage of Egypt from off of your shoulders. He did that through signs and wonders. Well, when Jesus came, what did he do? He signs and wonders. Let me go back to Isaiah. So, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he hath anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives, and the opening of the prisoners who are bound, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. So that's it. Again, this is where he stopped. But then, how did not, or I forget the English, how did Jesus not fulfill this? In other words, no other man, by the way, could have fulfilled this. So you have no other prophet, excuse me, who have said they were prophets. No other prophet, a true prophet that came in the name of the Lord, despite the signs or miracles they did, never proclaimed that they were the Messiah. The false messiahs never demonstrated or produced the signs that they were the Messiah. Jesus comes along through signs and wonders and did what? Produced that he was the Messiah. He was the Son given. All right, so the second part of this now is the idea that he is, when he says, verse 6, for a child will be given unto us, a son will be given, I'm sorry, a child will be born for us, and the son will be given to us, and the government will be upon his shoulders, and he will be named Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Eternal Father, Prince of Peace. Let me read verse 7. The dominion will be vast, and its prosperity will never end. And he will reign on the throne of David and over his kingdom to establish and sustain it with justice and righteousness for now and forevermore. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will accomplish this. So, when we talk about now how prophecy proclaims, we have the birth of Jesus, who will come and will die for the sins of the people. Then we have the prophecy of Jesus coming. This is referred to as the second coming of Jesus. Okay, the first coming was to die, to bear the sins of people. And again, we're going to see, even just in the book of Isaiah, several prophecies. We already saw one in chapter 61. But then, so the second coming is marked clearly that one, he will come physically to the earth, or come back physically. So this is why it's called the second coming. First coming, he came physically. He was born of the virgin. Remember in chapter 9, chapter 6, for a virgin will give birth. So this is another prophecy. But a prophecy of what? The first coming. Which is kind of interesting when you, again, I think about the Orthodox Jew. I'm going to pick on them for a moment because, again, I will ask the Orthodox Jew. Now, there are many the Jews are divided by many kind of beliefs. Israel today, the nation of Israel today, is very progressive, which is always funny to me when I hear the evangelical Christians, prop up Israel as if it was a fulfillment of these prophecies that we're reading. And it's not. Israel is cut off from God. They are broken. They're cut off. I'm going to get more into that later in another prophecy. But they're cut off from God. So what we're looking at today, when we say that the land of Israel, it's a nation that's not in covenant relationship with God. And therefore, how do we know that? Because one, the nation itself is very liberal, very progressive. You can almost call it an atheist nation, okay? Because in other words, many of the Jews don't even believe in God. So that's why when you hear the term Orthodox Jews, because that is the group that is probably most pious. In other words, they adhere most to the Old Testament scriptures. More like the Pharisees, though. Because the question is that, how are you following then God? Well, again, if you truly say you believe in God, then from this perspective, when did God tell the Jews to stop offering sacrifices, animal sacrifices. So what are you following? Now, we read it back in chapter 6 when it says the virgin would give birth. So then the Orthodox Jew, what do you do with that prophecy? How do you deny that prophecy as it relates to Jesus Christ? Okay, so beyond that then, what we have then is unfulfilled prophecy where it says, for watch this, for a child will be born for us. So in this verse of scripture here, we have both the first and second coming. Now watch this. For unto us a child will be born for us. So then to the Orthodox Jew, how do you read this in terms of the coming Messiah? They do believe in the coming Messiah. Now watch this. For unto us a child is born for us, and the son will be given. But watch this. Then he go on, and the government will be upon his shoulders. He will be named Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Eternal Father, Prince of Peace. When did this come to pass? By the way, so what you have here is both the first and second coming. Because remember, the same prophet said a virgin would give birth. Okay? Let me go back to, where you at? Chapter 6. Okay. Either chapter 6 or the chapter 7. Let's see if I can find it. Okay. Okay. Okay, that's for science from Phil. Okay, here we go. Chapter 14. This is, okay. Therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign. The virgin will conceive and have a son and name him Emmanuel. And by the time he learns to reject what is bad and choose for the good, he will be eating butter and honey. Now notice it says right here, the virgin will conceive. So do the Orthodox Jews believe that the virgin is yet to conceive a son? That's just a question that I have for them. Okay, so here in 6, he says, for a child will be born for us, right? So this is, again, the first, which you have in chapter 6, the first and second coming of Christ. For a child will be born for us, a son will be given to us, right? So a child will be born for us. Now, so notice the language. The child will be born for us, a son will be given to us. Now get that for a moment. A child will be born for us. What is the for? And then the son will be given to us. Okay? Well, the child and son are two different. Remember I said that the term sons, meaning a relationship. You kind of grow up into a relationship, okay, with the father on a mature level, sharing the business, sharing the kingdom. But a child is born for us, and then the child will be given to us, and he says the government will be upon his shoulders, and then he will be named Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Eternal Father, Prince of Peace. And then he goes on and says the dominion will be vast, and its prosperity will never end. So this is how we're talking about we're not talking about Israel at this point. We're talking about the rulership of Jesus, the Messiah, when he comes back the second time. The prosperity will never end. Notice he will reign on the throne of David and over his kingdom to establish and sustain it with justice and righteousness from now on and forever. The word of the Lord of hosts will accomplish this. It will be a wonderful thing. This word justice, to have a king rule with justice and righteousness. When we think about all the injustice in our government and our laws today, think about that. So I'm just fantasizing here, man, the wonderful time it will be. But notice he says the dominion will be vast, and so this is a earmark. This is a mark of the second coming of Jesus. So there's a couple of things before we close. He is going to establish the nation of Israel, and then he will rule over the nation of Israel. We will later see that not only will he rule over the nation of Israel, he will rule from Jerusalem. Jerusalem will be the capital of the world under the leadership of Jesus Christ. So what the earmarks during this time would be his dominion would be vast, and then his prosperity would never end. We get more details than that in other prophecies. In other words, the world will prosper during this time. We won't worry about prices and uh, global warming. I noticed in the earlier verse where we read that the spears, the weapons of war, will be put to an end. Okay, and Jesus will rule and reign with justice and righteousness. All right. So again, we will get into this more. There are plenty of verses of scripture on the second coming of Jesus. Now, as I said, this is not to be confused with the rapture of the church, which we're not going to get into at this juncture here. What I'm going to say is, while it is debatable what is the rapture of the church, when the rapture is going to church, some Christians don't even believe in the rapture of the church, which is what is not debatable because it is clearly, mainly spelled out in Scripture, is the second coming of Jesus. All right, guys, don't forget to like and share this video and subscribe to BP the Bible Perspective. And as always, if you have a thought or comment, add it to the comments section below. All comments are welcome. See you in the next study.